Hello, my name is Paola, and I'm going to be talking about pregnancy and climate change in Brazil and in the United States. So, the first slide that I did was just the content. This is like a brief preview of what I'm going to be talking about. Like part one, I'm going to be talking about demographics of health issues affecting pregnant women, the demographics of Brazil and the United States, the cultural similarities and differences among women, and ethical considerations and action, and of course, a summary and conclusion. So once again, part one is the demographics of climate change affecting pregnant women. So climate change and pregnant women. Climate change is a long-term shift of weather that negatively impacts the world. This normally comes from burning of fossil fuels, which causes heat-trapping gases, and I got this information from the United Nations, and how climate change affects pregnant women. The excessive and unnatural heat that is being produced from the atmosphere causes stress on the mother and fetus, which can lead to miscarriages, preterm births, stillbirths, and low birth weight. The endocrine system is severely affected by climate change, and why climate change affects pregnant women disproportionately. Every woman is different. You cannot predict exactly what the outcome is going to be for every single pregnancy. Some women may deal with this a lot better than others during climate change, but overall, climate change is not good at all for pregnancy. So here's some information on climate change, a brief history. Since the end of the Second World War, the economy has grown exponentially. This is because of the burning of fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal, which have risen many out of poverty. So basically, after World War II, a lot of people bought these companies, and they found more sources of fuel, and these fuels are not good for the environment at all. Which goes on to my second point. However, these are exactly what causes gases to be trapped in the atmosphere. Ever since then, climate change has only gotten worse. Mortality rates. Around 3.3 to 3.6 billion people are susceptible to the dangers of climate change because of location and vulnerability. Effects of climate change on pregnant women. So physical effects on pregnant women. There's a higher chance of preeclampsia and eclampsia, increased rates of infant mortality, fetal and infant growth restriction, and high possibility of illness in children later on, because you're more susceptible to the gases when you're a fetus, but later on it becomes a problem in childhood. And exposure to extreme heat has the possibility to lead to dehydration and kidney failure in pregnant women. I got this from the US EPA. Emotional effects on pregnant women. It's a stress inducer. Knowing all the illnesses and birth defects the baby may be born with, which then stress, emotional stress, leads back to physical effects, because just by mentally not being okay, your body is going to reflect that. And social effects on pregnant women, I would just say pregnant women are now taking a lot more precautions, which socially, they might not go out more, they have to stay inside more. I know women who wear face masks to prevent them from breathing in the harmful chemicals that are being produced from pollution. Barriers pregnant women may face accessing current prevention and treatment modalities. So some of the big ones that I know of, I've also researched this, is not being qualified for insurance or for healthcare. As you all may know, the United States does not have free healthcare for all. So in the United States, you might not be qualified for insurance. You may not be able to afford to get treatment for this or prevention. My second point is you might not be taken seriously. I know that a lot of women, especially pregnant women, are not taken seriously when they say that they're experiencing something, and not having adequate treatments yet. I say that climate change is a fairly new thing, and there aren't really treatments out there to help pregnant women per se. And finally, misdiagnosis. I know that If you feel sick, if you're feeling the effects of climate change, you might be misdiagnosed, especially if you're pregnant, because pregnancy is very hard on some women. So you may be told that you are dealing with something else rather than like the effects of climate change. Okay, so part 2 of the slideshow are the demographics of the countries. So once again, I did Brazil and the United States. And I said the key factors that contribute to or prevent the health of women in these settings. So in Brazil, it's less advanced medically in some parts. Like some parts aren't urbanized, and some parts, like the Amazon, there are still people living there. And medically, they are not advanced. They might not even know that much about climate change. However, to kind of contradict that, they do have free healthcare there. So, like the more urbanized areas, they can go into the hospital, and if they need like a breathing tubes or anything related medically, they are able to get that for free. So you are more likely to be helped in Brazil. However, Brazil, it's very bad air pollution because there are parts of Brazil that are like big cities like Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, things like that, and they do not have the best air pollution. The United States, it's more advanced with technicality, like more medicine. We just have more technology in general, so we may be able to help. However, there is no free healthcare, so you may be paying out of pocket if you do not qualify for insurance. To go off of Brazil, the United States also has bad air pollution, so they kind of go hand in hand on that. So some factors of the U.S. and Brazil. So demographic of Brazil, there's 214.3 million residents, while in the United States there are 331.9 million residents. And geography, Brazil is mostly, there's like jungles, there's the coastal plains, the dry grasslands, cities. The United States is more like scattered because we have cold areas, we have warm areas, whereas Brazil's more warm. We have central plain, mountains, we have volcanic topography. In Hawaii, we have like the cold in Alaska. Politically, Brazil is trying to help this with a long-term objective of carbon neutrality by 2050 and plans to stop illegal deforestation by 2028. Now, I couldn't really find exactly what the United States are trying to do when I looked this up, but I know that 78% of Democrats believe climate change is a threat, while 23% of Republicans believe it's a threat. So, Democrats they believe that climate change is a thing, while the Republicans are less likely to believe that. In education, in Brazil, it's a state policy to teach on climate change, while in the United States, I found that specifically it became a law to teach about climate change in New Jersey, which I thought was interesting. The United States and climate change, the world ranking in health is we are ranked 69th. The incidence is the temperatures have risen has risen by 0.32 degrees Celsius and 0.55 degrees. I'm at Fahrenheit, not Celsius, per decade. And the morbidity plus mortality rates, there's 25,000 rates annually between 2011 and 2020 due to extreme temperatures. Now, Brazil and climate change. They are 83rd in world ranking in health. 28% of Brazil's land is no longer available due to climate change. And morbidity and mortality rates. Heat waves have caused preterm births and increased mortality, unfortunately. So part 3, the cultural similarities and differences among women. Sociocultural factors. In Brazil, in the less urbanized areas, specifically the Amazon, women receive most of the burden when dealing with climate change. According to the UN, women are a lot more likely to receive gender-based violence after an extreme event and are most of the domestic workers there. As climate change gets worse, places that are agriculturally work-heavy get affected. Researcher Maggie Rodrigues has stated, one study suggested that areas deforested for over a decade receive less rainfall than others during dry season. Women are going to be the root of climate change in the Amazon as they contribute the most to agriculture. On top of that, women may be dealing with this as they are pregnant. The stress and hard labor with domestic work can deeply affect the fetus. So not only is climate change affecting the pregnant mother and fetus, it's very stress inducing. This whole situation in Brazil and climate change is just not looking good for mothers and their fetuses. So sociocultural factors in America, I wrote, although the United States has a lot less agriculture than Brazil, pregnant women still face challenges dealing with climate change. Food insecurity is a big factor. If pregnant women are being deprived of the nutrition that they need, the fetus is going to be the one who suffers the most, as they are not being developed correctly. Water scarcity is also an uprising issue in the United States, which puts the pregnant women and their fetuses at risk. Dehydration in pregnancy causes decreased uterine blood flow and is associated with preterm labor. Which I did not know that water scarcity was a problem in the United States. I'm assuming it's a problem also in Brazil. And yeah. Part 4, the ethical considerations in action with climate change. So what is being done? In the United States, there are only 7 years to reduce gas emissions by 50 to 52%. The government is currently participating in many steps to decrease the amount of pollution in both the United States and the globe. Here are some examples that I found on the internet, like the passage of transformative laws, the Inflation Reduction Act, and bipartisan infrastructure law that are positioning the U.S. to cut emissions in half by 2030. And we only have 7 years to do that, which is going to be very difficult. And over $240 billion in new clean energy manufacturing investments, and transitioning to 100% carbon pollution-free electricity by 2030, 100% zero emissions vehicle acquisitions by 2035, and net zero emissions by 2050. And what is being done in Brazil? An agreement was made with the United States government to reduce pollution and climate change. Now, I know this is the United States, but Brazil and the United States are going hand in hand trying to fix the pollution. Here are some things that I found. They are countering the climate crisis by pursuing ambitious targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, fire prevention and management by working with specialized Brazilian entities to build capacity and invest in fire prevention, and promoting the conservation of the Amazon forest and its biodiversity through sustainable development and investment. Societal/organizational responsibility. Both the United States and Brazil, and any country in that fact, need to advocate for women's health being affected by climate change, especially for women that are pregnant and preparing to bring a healthy baby into the world, which is difficult to do when the mother is breathing in polluted air, and I didn't put this in, but drinking polluted water, and being scarce on food and water. Climate change violates many human rights, like the right to life, health, food, water, and shelter, which I did not know. I would have thought this only affected the right of health, in my opinion. So I was surprised to learn that. And part 5, summary and conclusion. So a quick summary of what we just talked about. I'll talk about the key points. The mother is at risk of preeclampsia, which is it's a dangerous pregnancy complication that is from hypertension, high blood pressure, and it puts the baby at risk. It can be fatal. It's very serious. It can be fatal. It may injure the baby. Preterm birth, low birth weight, infant mortality, which kind of ties back with preeclampsia, and illness in children. Women in agriculture-dependent areas are most likely to suffer from domestic violence, and they statistically take care of land more, at least in Brazil. And there are many things being done in both Brazil and America to try and reduce the trapped gases by more than half by 2030. So, in conclusion, although the United States and Brazil are two very different countries with very different agricultural laws, they both suffer with bad pollution and climate change that they are trying to decrease and get rid of completely. That is the goal. I think it's an unrealistic goal by 2030, but it is the goal. Climate change has a horrible effect on mothers and their fetuses, which is causing a whole new generation of children with bad health and potential illnesses that will develop later in life. It may come as a shock to people that climate change is affiliated with many birth defects. It most definitely was a shocker for me. I did not know that climate change was a contributor to birth defects. But it is a serious issue that needs to be resolved as soon as possible. I didn't put it in here, but once again, we are trying to get rid of the pollution by 2030, which we have 7 years to do that. Many people do not have faith that that is going to be a possibility, but we can only hope. And these are my sites that I used, and that is it.